All right, off we go. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Victor Davila. I'm on the AIGA DEC Steering Committee, and on behalf of the whole team, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's AIGA DEC virtual event. The AIGA DEC is part of AIGA, the professional organization for design, and the DEC's mission is to enhance and support the abilities of design educators and educational institutions, whether K through 12 higher ed or another kind of a design program, to prepare future designers for excellence in design practice, design theory, and design writing while supporting the fundamental mission of AIGA of furthering creative excellence. Before we get started, like I mentioned before, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from and how you heard about us and this event so we can let our communications team know what's working and what is not working. Just as an FYI, this event will be recorded and potentially be posted on the DEC YouTube channel. And if you can make sure you are muted unless you are speaking and asking questions, we would appreciate it. We have an amazing event today. So I also want to, before I move on, introduce Patricia Childers, who is part of the AIGA DEC Steering Committee, and she will be handling a lot of the management of today's event as well. So we have a great event for you today, so let's go ahead and introduce today's awesome set of speakers. Christopher Sleboda and Kathleen Sleboda teach at Boston University and the Rhode Island School of Design. Together, the pair have run Drawdown Books, publishing and curating printed matter since 2012. Liese Zahabi is not only one of my favorite people in the world, is a graphic and interaction designer and associate professor of design at the University of New Hampshire, and she's also one of the former team leads at the DEC. So welcome back, Liese Zahabi. Liese recently published Beyond the Search Engine, Design of the Online Search Experience with Routledge. Did I pronounce that right? Routledge. Thank you, Liese. And then Jared Fuller is a designer, writer, educator, editor, and podcaster, and also on the DEC Steering Committee, along with Patricia and I. He is an assistant professor of graphic design at North Carolina State University, director of 26, a multidisciplinary design and editorial studio, and host of a design podcast called Scratching the Surface. He previously worked as a designer at Facebook, Warby Parker, and the Whitney Museum of American Art, and as an editor for AIGA Eye on Design. So welcome, everyone. So we can go ahead and get started, and I'll pass it off to Patricia. You want to start us off? You're muted, Patricia.
Thanks. We're going to have our guests give a brief or give a little bit of an introduction, and we'll hold questions till the end. And we'll start with Liese.
All right. So hello, everyone. I have some slides that I'm going to share. I prepared way too much material, so I'm going to zoom right through all of it, but I will share my slide deck at the end. So if anybody wants it, you'll be able to grab the link at the end. So let me share my screen, the obligatory announcement of sharing my screen. And hopefully everyone can see that. I'm seeing nods. Okay, good, because now I'm in the land. So I've titled my presentation, How I Managed to Write a Book. We're starting off this talk with a very more traditional kind of academic publishing, and then we're going to move through a lot of different variations. So I just published my book, so we're kind of starting with me. So this is how I managed with a lot of fits and starts. Only took 12 years to publish this book. So just a little bit about me. As Victor mentioned, I am an associate professor, finally, at the University of New Hampshire. I just got tenure this last summer after being in academia for almost 13 years. And I live in Durham, New Hampshire with my husband, Michael, and my cats, Ivan on the left and Ladybird on the right. And I love what I do. And this is just a little bit of my creative work, kind of pushing, swiping through for you to all see. Whoops, I don't know why this won't move forward. Here we go. So I'm going to go with a what, where, when, why kind of setup for my talk. So what is it that I published? it's this book with this title. It's 70,000 words. That was something that I pitched to my publishers, and then that was approved, and I had to stick to that word limit. It's 6 chapters plus an introduction. It's 184 pages once it was typeset. And my book really is focused on research. So this is not a design, lots of images book. This is a research, lots of citations kind of book. And it focuses on the history, design, and cultural implications of search interfaces on the internet. I'm not going to be able to use my arrow keys. Here's the cover. I did not get to design it. I got to pick from a template, and I got to pick a stock photo, so I had that control. And luckily, they had my favorite color as one of the options. And I got 8 copies of it as part of the agreement with the publisher. And here are 6 of them. And it's really kind of thrilling to see them on my bookshelf this way. Why did I write a book? The simple answer: to meet the requirements for tenure and promotion. I'm in an art and art history department, and it was just easy to write a book that the rest of the college would then be like, yes, you did it. You did research, versus the really lots of unusual things that designers often do for tenure and promotion. The complicated answer is that 12 years ago, somebody suggested that I could write a book. And that opened it up as a possibility. I was at a teaching-focused institution before, and so I didn't have to write a book. And then I told everyone I was writing a book, and then I felt obligated to actually do it, even when I didn't feel like doing it anymore. When did I do this? So as I said, I started this project way back in 2012, and then worked on it in little fits and starts. It absolutely helped me move to a research institution, the University of Maryland, in 2015, and then definitely helped me land the current job that I have at another Research One institution here at the University of New Hampshire. I did conduct a lot of research and reading and things like that starting in 2012, but I finally pushed to submit a proposal to a publisher in 2021 because I knew I would never actually finish the damn thing if I didn't have a deadline and a contract. Here's the timeline of how this all worked out, just so that it gives you all an idea of how long the stuff takes. So in December 21, I submitted my first proposal to the MIT Press, which was rejected. And then after I had gotten rejected, I realized I needed some help. So I reached out to Robin Landa, who is an amazing designer and author within the design educator community. She's published a bunch of books, so I asked her for advice. That was really hard for me to do, but I'm so glad I did it. She was incredibly generous, and she helped me to strengthen my proposal. And then I reached out to another colleague, Heather Corcoran, and also asked for her feedback then in the summer of 2022. I finally submitted my proposal to Routledge in August of 2022, the end of August. So you can see how long I was working on that. And then it got passed to a second editor at Routledge. And then the proposal was actually sent out for peer review after it was, received, just a couple weeks later. So that part of the process went quick. It was out for peer review for about a month and a half. And then it came back with favorable approval. I had to write a response back to Routledge telling them how I would address the feedback from the peer reviewers. And then I got my contract on Halloween of 2022. And then I had to write this book. So here's the timeline. My original deadline was about a year and a half to write these 70,000 words. And then I negotiated just a couple extra months. I delivered my manuscript on July 31st, the night before it was actually due, at 7:34 p.m. And then it kind of went through revisions and page reviews, page proofs, and all of that kind of stuff. And then was finally published on Christmas Eve of this past year. So here's the timeline to help you visualize of how much work was sort of happening in all these fits and starts. And then when I actually wrote this book, because I'm a terrible procrastinator. So I really wrote it in like 4 months. I do not recommend that. It was incredibly painful to write a 70,000 word book, most of it in the course of just 4 months. It meant I had to write every single day from June 1st through July 31st without exception for 7, 8, 9 hours every day. And I stopped sleeping very well, and I didn't realize how awful it was or how stressed out I was until it was over. I was really in denial. So on that happy note, where did I write the book? Here's where the magic happened. Luckily, I researched the internet and online search interfaces, so I could kind of do that anywhere. Um, but also, here's the less comfortable magic. You can see that this would pretty much happen every day. My cat would steal my chair, and I sat in the sad little folding chair to write this book. Who? So I looked at a bunch of different publishers. I needed to go with a traditional academic publisher because this thing needed to be peer reviewed. I'm at an R1 research institution. So I looked at, a few different places. I was rejected by MIT Press. Another colleague had published with them, so I started with them. But I settled on Routledge, which is with Taylor and Francis. It's a huge publishing company because a lot of my colleagues at UNH successfully published with them. So I knew it counted. And I knew that other people had had good experiences with them. I sent my proposal to one editor that seemed like it fit, and then they just sent me on to somebody else. And then I worked with an editorial assistant for pretty much the whole process. Just a little bit about academic publishers. There's a whole bunch of them out there. A lot of universities have them. They publish all sorts of different things. It just depends on the press. But you can look online and find a lot of different places you can submit proposals to. And what I would encourage people who want to publish books to do is to look at books that you love and then see who published them and start with that. And you can also look at where your colleagues have published. And that could be design educators, but also other people at your universities. Every single publisher has a website and they will tell you what they accept and how you can submit work to them. Proposals typically have a very similar format. So once you write one, it's not like you have to start completely over to submit to somebody else. And you need to treat this like you do a client project brief. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. It's really all about the marketing. So you're describing your project, you're describing the audience, and you're trying to convince them that they should publish your book because they'll be able to sell it. And that's really the whole thing is like this business, right? And I would say if you have to get your project peer reviewed, you're going to have to supply the publisher with a list of peer reviewers. It is absolutely okay to pick people you think will say yes. Right. So it's totally okay to pick people who have the right expertise, but that also might review your project favorably. Here is Routledge's page. It has like hundreds of editors. It's this huge company and they edit all sorts of different kinds of projects. So your project might not neatly fit into one category or another, but you should find like the few on this list that might be a fit, and then you can submit directly to them. They will absolutely pass you along to somebody else if they feel like it might be a better fit. They also have a fantastic section on their site that's all about how to publish with them and why you should publish with them. They have a ton of awesome materials that will help you put together a proposal. So even if you all didn't want to submit to Routledge, you could still go download their free PDF, and that might help you put together a good proposal for somebody else. MIT Press did not have a big formal structure or framework. You just kind of put together a description, whereas a place like Routledge does have pretty much a standard framework of what they want you to put in. So these were the contents of my proposal, which I'm happy to share with anybody who wants it. And it's got some of the things you would expect to be there, but also they want you to talk about who's the market. Who's the primary and secondary markets? Who's going to read this book or buy this book? Does it have international appeal? What's the contribution of your project to the discipline? And also, you need to find a list of competing and related titles, and then write about that and convince them that you understand how your book fits into the landscape. So that's a part that I think most of the big publishing houses will ask for, that I really encourage people to think through and be thoughtful about. Oops, I need to go to the next one. So how did I do this? How did I write this book? You got the contract, now what the heck? So these were the tools that I used to help keep me on track. Most of us are designers, we're also educators. We kind of understand how to organize things, and I think you need to use that as a strength. So I use the time tracker Toggle. It's free. There's a premium version you can pay for, but I just use the free version. This was great because I could log my hours and then sort of see, right, how much time I was spending on these things. And so you can set it up so that you can log everything week by week. You can repeat events. It's got a calendar system, but also reports, so you can see how much time you've been spending. For my note taking, for all of my resources and all of my, all of the information, I used Microsoft OneNote. I used to use Evernote, but now that's not free and as good as it used to be anymore. So I migrated everything to Microsoft OneNote, but there are other note-taking systems out there. I highly recommend, though, if you're doing any kind of research where you're needing to have a lot of resources, that you have a place to organize all of that. So you can kind of see I have all my articles, all my books, all of that stuff. And then because it's digital, it's all searchable, which is fantastic. I used a citation manager because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sources that I cited in my book. Zotero is a free one that's actually really excellent. You can, suck information into it, but then also barf it back out into bibliographies, right, into endnotes, and it does all the major, publication styles. I used Word to write the whole thing, and you can see I've got versions upon versions upon versions. I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of words I wrote that I then had to painfully cut to get to the 70,000. But it was important, right, to keep all of that so I could go back to it if I needed to. I have accountability partners. We write 2 to 3 times a week for a few hours each session. We log into Zoom, we catch up and chat, we set our goals, we mute ourselves, and we leave it up in the corner so that we know somebody else is writing. This was huge. If not for Audra Buck Coleman and Anne McDonald, I never would have finished this book. They're amazing. Anne Barry also has open writing sessions for design educators to join. And they have the same kind of format, and it's huge because you just know other people are also doing the thing. And it really has helped me to kind of keep on track and to butt in seat, get the work done. And shout out to Lo-Fi Girl YouTube channel, because I put on my headphones, I put on the music, and then I'm just in the zone. And that tells me, okay, it's work time. And so I used this constantly. This is how I wrote the book. So here's my advice really quickly, because I'm sure I'm over 10 minutes. Use your design skills. You know how to organize stuff. You can totally use that to write a book. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Even if you're incredibly independent the way I am, people are more than happy to help you. Other people have done this already. They have advice. They can look at your stuff. They can help you, right, figure it all out. Ask for help. Having a contract and a deadline is really motivating if you are a terrible procrastinator like me. Don't wait to start writing. I had convinced myself that note-taking and reading counted as like actually writing the book, and it's necessary. It needed to happen, but I needed to actually write so I could figure out what I wanted to say and put words on the page that were my words. So don't wait to start writing. Learn from my mistake. Writing groups and accountability partners are amazing. They will help you keep on track. Scheduling in regular sessions and keeping them sacred, like this is my writing time, is huge. Small incremental progress is still really great progress, and it adds up. Be wary of perfectionistic tendencies, right? The book's never going to be perfect. You want to write your book and make your contribution to the discipline, and try not to think about how amazing all these other books out in the world are and how yours will never be as amazing. And be wary of perfectionistic fantasies where you're like, oh, I'm going to do all of these things in this 2 hours, or I'm going to get it all done in 2 months. You have to be realistic about what you can actually accomplish. I did it. I wrote the book, and you totally can do it too. And here's my email address, and I will put that plus these slides, the link to these slides, up in the chat, and I'll stop talking now because I'm sure I went over my 10 minutes.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Liese. I love hearing your background on the book because we actually just received it at Drawdown Books, and I was paging through it, and I love seeing like everything come together. So just for everyone, I'm going to reintroduce us again. Christopher Sleboda and I are Drawdown Books. My name is Kathleen Sleboda. Christopher is an associate professor of graphic design at Boston University, where he also chairs the undergraduate department in graphic design. I teach as an adjunct there, and we also are critics in graphic design at the Rhode Island School of Design, where we teach undergraduates and graduates for the past 7 years.
So this is a 10-minute PDF presentation about Drawdown Books for AIGA design educators. It's February 7th, and this file was last modified 5 minutes before we started because Kathleen was still finding typos. This text is set in 60-point Musée Sans, which is a typeface we're currently developing, and you can see the promotion for this talk kind of typeset there in Robo font. This is a business card that we made for the Tokyo Art Book Fair in November 2024. It was double-sided and vertical, and it said, "Konnichiwa." This is a business card for Drawdown Books. We highly recommend going to the Tokyo Art Book Fair. It was our first time, and I said to Kathleen, why haven't we ever come here before? Like, why did it take us this long?
And as the business card says, we are both a publisher, so we publish our own work and the work of other people, and we're an online bookshop, and we distribute a lot of titles related to graphic design, to typography, things that are self-published, commercial titles and graphic design, really with a focus sort of on the sorts of resources that we need and that our students need.
This is packing tape that we made this month. We're really excited about it. It's printed in PMS 361 on craft tape. And we spend a lot of time making sure the books get to their final destination as safe as possible. A lot of bubble wrap, a lot of padding and paper.
And as this says, we began Drawdown in 2012. So we've been doing this for more than a decade now.
This is an ink drawdown. A lot of people originally, when we started Drawdown, thought that we were really good at drawing. And the truth is neither of us can draw. That's why we do like the computer. But an ink drawdown is something, if you're printing a book with an offset printer and you're thinking about using, in this case, PMS 032, you can have them make this. They mix that paint ink in a can and draw it down on the different papers you're considering, and you can actually see what that color looks like. And we love this because we did make a lot of them, but we love this as a kind of way to think about our publishing and print, is like trying a bunch of things just to see what they look like. This kind of methodical examination of the process. This is the Drawdown logo created in 2012. It was typeset in brown, which is a typeface by a real sack.
When we started Drawdown, it was mainly to publish our own work, but recently we've become more interested in working with others and collaborating on publications. And so our next project that we're working on is a second edition of Rachel Berger's Toolkit for Gathering, which is a work that she self-published when she was an associate professor of graphic design at CCA. She's now the provost at Cal Arts. But she had a wonderful book that really was a toolkit for other people. And we love kind of distributing these kinds of resources to the community. And we knew she reso printed this during a summer break and coil bound it herself, and it was a big undertaking. I think there was an edition of maybe 200 that she was able to produce, but this will be a commercial edition that will get that work and the research that she and her team did out to a broader community.
Yeah, so we're really excited about launching this, hopefully at the LA Art Book Fair later this year. This is the latest round of quotes we've got from printers, so we're spending a lot of time on where are we going to print this and how will we avoid tariffs. So it's a big thing on our mind right now. And thinking about paper choices. This is the first tote bag we made for Drawdown, which was 16 pages, and we really just didn't have a lot of money to start producing books, so we embraced the idea that some of our earliest publications could be really small, as small as 16 pages.
And this is the point we'd like to give as a piece of advice if you're interested in sort of engaging the world of artist book publishing, to that idea of like reaching for the stars. Starting where you are, working incrementally, working with the tools and the parameters that you have is really a place to get started, begin to work out some ideas, begin to sort of network with the community of other makers and designers, and really create a step structure that can be supportive of your creative outlook.
Small budget, small books, but big ideas was our thinking there. There's a photo of a new publication we're excited about called Plain Text, which we just arrived today. So here's Kathleen sort of opening it.
So we carry a lot of work that also has non-commercial distribution from different graphic design schools and also independent type foundries. This is a new type foundry in France that we saw this online and we said we'd love to carry it. And that's actually the way we find a lot of materials, is reaching out to people. But we also have an online resource for people who are interested in submitting their work to us. So there's really a two-way street with the way that we find work and that way that people submit work to us.
This is our website.
So as I mentioned, we do carry self-published work, so things that are coming out of design schools, type foundries, independent publishing, artist books. But we also carry a lot of very traditional graphic design titles, including sometimes textbooks, because we really like the sort of conversation and the juxtaposition between sort of classic titles of graphic design, but also creating channels for distribution for things that haven't traditionally been part of that discourse.
And it's organized by books, magazines, type specimens, zines, posters, and accessories here. Also, this is a special code for 20% off site-wide today only. AIGA DEC is the code. And Kathleen and I love procuring publications ourselves. This is us in the Tokyo Art Book Fair with two of our big finds there that we are happy to put into our suitcase and bring back here.
So part of the joy of publishing for us is being able to work with people around the world and sort of build our connections and the group of sort of collaborators that we're able to work with. And actually, that's another aspect of the distribution model too, is we get to see all of this wonderful graphic design that's being produced from around the world. So it's really a win-win situation. Like, we get to send that out to people who will appreciate it, but we also get to see it ourselves.
This is a student's BFA thesis book that we distribute, Vincent Liu, who graduated from Boston University recently.
So these are students that we've worked with, but we also carry thesis books from students who we haven't specifically worked at. That's where that submissions program is so important. But we do always, encourage students. Part of our interest is that there's so much research and effort that goes into these thesis books. And oftentimes people have a few extra copies, and we like to encourage people, put your work out in the world, because one of the amazing things with publications is that you don't know where they're going to land. They can connect with people that you don't anticipate will be interested in your work and open up a doorway for you. So that's true for design educators as well as design students. But we think it's a really empowering model for sort of creating work and making it part of a larger conversation.
This is Rebecca Wilkinson's thesis book from RISD from earlier or last year, and it's called Produce, Perform, Great publication. And this is one of the many titles we carry from schools worldwide, a line which forms a volume 6 from the London College of Communication. Oh, this is how many times we posted on our Instagram account. And this is how we photograph all the publications we distribute to show you all the wonderful spine. And this is the Sony A7C II camera that we use with the macro lens to make sure the type is nice and crisp. These are some of the posters that we've made over the years that we give out free at book fairs, because we always wanted that thing to be about just like making a connection with people and not really selling it. So we made 50 over the years. And then this was a book we made about the posters, and we had a wonderful group of design educators such as Mary Yang, shout out, I think she's in the audience here, and others write texts about just the idea of posters and the idea of a giveaway. These are some of the other titles that we've published.
So publishing gives us the ability to write, design, curate, and also collaborate. So one of the books, the gold book that's on the screen, is actually, we co-published this with the Parsons Communication Design Program. And instead of having an exhibition at the end of the year, their program is so large they can't sort of spatially accommodate all the student work. They're producing this printed catalog that can then circulate. A wonderful model, and one we like to show to people. And we're very excited to be able to collaborate with them on making sure this gets distributed around the world. And then we also have sort of things that we've produced ourselves that are our own work, the work of friends of ours, things that are archival in nature, where we invite other people to sort of write about graphic design, to write about printed matter. Really, the publishing as Drawdown is really an extension of our own interests and sort of like where we're going as we make our way from academia into sort of artist book publishing.
These are some publications and exhibitions we've produced as a result of our teaching. So we've done a variety of shows and book publications all around the world.
So Newly Formed is a course that we teach at the Rhode Island School of Design in experimental publishing. And that is an actually like public facing course as part of its DNA. So we would create broadsides and larger books that we publish the student work. It's very empowering.
This is a recent show called Surface Anomaly, New Explorations in Poster Design, that just closed in January in Seoul, Korea. This is a book fair we organized at Yale for 6 years that was called Odds and Ends Art Book Fair. And this is an annual event we now organize at Boston University called Multiple Formats. Applications for the book fair are still open until tomorrow. If anyone wants to join us, March 22nd, it'll be this year. And this is a 2024 publication we produced during a workshop at Otis last summer, still available on our website. And this has probably been 10 minutes. Time flies. Thank you, everybody.
And next up is Jarrett.
I don't know how I'm going to follow this. It's so nice to be here with, 3 other panelists who I admire for many, many reasons. Let me now share my screen. Also, I'm also feel really good about both of you talking about how long this is going to take. This is a edited version of a presentation that I usually give to thesis students when I go and give talks to thesis students. That's normally like 45 minutes or an hour. I took out a bunch of slides and I'm going to try to do it in 10 minutes also. Does everyone see that? Is that okay? Okay. So just by way of quick introduction or reintroduction, my day job, sort of what I spend most of my time doing now, is I'm a professor at NC State down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Depending on how familiar you are with United States geography, I'm that blue dot down in the corner. But what really interests me and what sort of takes up a lot of my brain space is thinking about different ways of publishing. And so I teach classes on publishing, and I've worked across publishing at every stage, from designer to editor to publisher to bookmaker. And so I write quite a bit about design for a wide variety of publications. I've edited a handful of books, collected essays, books from design programs. There's the Parsons book in the middle that came out a couple of years ago, and then that book, Where Must Design Go Next, is a book all about the Institute of Design at Illinois Tech. I have another book coming out next year, which I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but stay tuned for that. For 3 years, I was an editor at AIGA Ion Design, where we were really thinking about what it meant to write about design today. What were the issues that were most pressing for graphic designers today, and how do we make that as accessible and interesting and as engaging as possible? And that was a very fun, kind of intellectually engaging experience that I miss every day. But what I've been doing for the last 10 years, which is what I want to spend most of my hopefully 10 minutes talking about, is this podcast that I've been running called Scratching the Surface. This is a podcast of long form interviews with designers, writers, architects, educators, theorists, people who sit between disciplines about how they think about their work and the ideas that drive their work. And so to frame all of this, I want to kind of talk about how I started doing this and why I started doing this, how it evolved a little bit. And so this project started when I was a graduate student at MICA in Baltimore about 10 years ago. And this is probably a question that everybody in this room has thought of at one point, where you're in grad school and you're like, what am I going to do for my thesis? How do I sort of take all of this stuff that I'm thinking about? And I spent a lot of my time at grad school thinking about media. I was making books, I was making videos, I was making like zines and posters and like putting things up on walls. And I was really interested in this idea of like how ideas spread. I was really interested in this kind of cultural side of graphic design. And so I was circling this idea of, what does it mean to be a designer who is also writing? How do you think about the positionality as being someone who's in the field and also critiquing the field? How does that change when you're back in the studio? How does that change what you write about? And vice versa, when you're writing, how does that change when you're in the studio? And I didn't know what form that was going to take. I didn't know where I was going with this, but I was really interested in these questions. And so I started interviewing designers who I thought were operating at these spaces, who were sort of sitting at these intersections between design and writing. And I took pictures with a lot of them when I had more hair and looked younger. And the idea, as I started doing this, is that, oh, this is going to go into a book. I'm going to have this book about design writing. And I was like, oh, but I'm doing all these other things. So maybe there should be a website too. Maybe there's like an event. And somewhere in that discussion and in thinking about that, I realized that all these interviews that I was doing, that I was recording, were actually really interesting on their own, that these didn't need to be background research that went into some, quote unquote, traditional thesis, that maybe the interviews themselves could be the thesis project, could be the project itself. And I pitched this to my graduate thesis advisors, and am forever grateful for them for letting me run with this idea of doing a graphic design thesis project that was entirely audio based, that had no visual component. And so what that became was this podcast called Scratching the Surface. And so if you go back and listen to the first 20 episodes, which please do not do, but if you did, that is what I submitted for my thesis at MICA. And as I was working on this my last year, I got really interested in this idea of how does this become real? What is the difference between a thesis project and a real project? How does this live beyond the walls of this institution? How is the audience of this thing not just my thesis advisors, my classmates, the reviewers? And so part of my project then became thinking about how do I build an audience? How do I actually get these conversations out into the world? So this is 10 years ago. Social media was a little bit more of a pleasant place then. And so there were Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts and, all of the platforms, and started thinking about how do I take snippets out of episodes? How do I start to kind of see these ideas spread in different ways? And through that, very, very slowly, an audience started to kind of cohere around these conversations that I was having. And so because it was a graphic design thesis, I did make a small book with a limited run for when I graduated. And then I also did an exhibition for my thesis exhibition. Instead of showing my own work, I curated a show of work from the people that I had talked to. Then this sort of funny thing happened where I was on the cusp of graduating and realized that all of the questions that I was trying to answer with my thesis were not answered yet, and that all the questions that I was asking in these interviews were actually just leading to more questions, and that all of these things I was thinking about were so much bigger than I realized. And so I had this moment where I graduated and sort of was like, how does this thing keep going? I kind of feel like I don't want to stop doing this. And so I was able to, after I graduated, I just sort of never stopped. I just kind of kept talking to people. And so here we are. It's 9 years. This year, I've recorded almost 300 episodes with people across the design fields. And it's become really weirdly very central to everything else that I do. It's a way for me to kind of work ideas out, to talk to people smarter than me about all the things that I'm thinking about sort of in my work on any given basis. If you go back and listen to every episode and you just listen to the questions that I'm asking, you can figure out what am I dealing with? What are the issues that I'm focused on right now? And that way it's a very sort of selfish endeavor. But like Christopher and Kathleen said, I was also really interested in how I can bring other people into this. What other things are outside of the things that I'm thinking about are, how can this platform that I've built be a platform for others? And so a couple years ago, I launched a sort of sister kind of cousin site called Scratch, which is a place for long form experimental design writing that lives between things, writing that doesn't have a clear place, writing that is not quite academic, but it's not quite kind of popular journalism. And so over the last 2 years, we've published fiction, we've published interviews, we've published sort of memoir-esque writing, all stuff that kind of doesn't have a clear place. The places to publish right now, especially in design, are fewer and fewer. And this, I hope, is a way that I can kind of make space for all that in between stuff that gets lost. And then last year, to try to help sustain this a little bit better, we launched a Substack that has a free monthly newsletter, but then also has a paid tier that has bonus interviews and content behind a paywall also, which you should all subscribe to. If you kind of want design news and book roundups and all sorts of interesting things there. And so what started as this thesis project really became this kind of multi-platform project for people interested in what I like to say are these in-between spaces, the stuff that doesn't quite fit anywhere else. And so what I want to kind of wrap up with are 4 things that I think about all the time in this work that I do. Maybe these are lessons, maybe these are sort of ethos, maybe these are insights. I'm not quite sure the word we can use here, but these are 4 things that I think are critical in how we think about design publishing today. And so the first one is this idea that publishing creates publics. I think it's really important to think about the act of publishing as not just putting something out into a void, but actually about creating community. When you put something out into the world, the actual interesting stuff is the interaction that happens after, the communities that are formed around it. And I think this idea of publics is really important in in the world generally right now, but especially in the design world where so much is changing so fast, where different parts of the industry are splintering. Publishing is a way to bring people together in different ways. And so that leads me to my second idea, which is that this idea that ideas travel and traveling connects. And this comes back to this idea of like the in-betweenness. So much of publishing is siloed right now. There's the academic publishing, like Lisa was talking about. There's the kind of popular journalism. There's the sort of indie press. There's all of this stuff, and they're not in dialogue with each other. And how can we think about ideas that start to move between these? How can we start to see how ideas can travel in different ways? One way to do that, I think, is to actually play with the form, to play with the container for this. And so my third lesson is that we should think about publishing not just as content, but also form. As designers, we are also form makers. How can we start to play with form in different ways? How can we break form? How can we think about other avenues to publish and to distribute our ideas? I want to see more YouTube channels. I want to see more TikTok. I actually don't want to see more TikTok videos, but I want people to make more TikTok videos. What are these other methods? What are these emerging platforms? And how can we play with those to create content in different ways, to publish ideas for people who otherwise would not be able to interact with these ideas? And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is I believe really firmly that dialogue is so much more interesting than monologue. I'm so tired of the sort of design giant up on the stage showing their work, as if they have all the answers. The book that is fully written, that is like sort of the definitive text, the essay with all of the answers. What I want to see is more of that messy process. I want to see the exchange happening. I want to see people thinking out loud, which I say after 45 minutes of us just sort of presenting. But the exciting stuff is what's going to happen after this, where we're all sort of talking with each other. And I think as publishers, as people who publish, how can we publish that thinking out loud? How can we publish those ideas? How can we think in public, I guess, is sort of what's really interesting to me, and then create conversation around that. And so I think that was like about 10 minutes. I think that was probably pretty close. So thank you so much. That's all I have.
Thank you, everyone. That was amazing. And I like how you ended that, Jarrett, with dialogue being more interesting than monologue, although these monologues were great. So we're talking about three different approaches, and we'd like to take some questions now. Can anybody you can actually put questions in the chat or raise your hand. So, Jared, do you have any ideas on how you can kind of like transcend these mediums to bring to make it more approachable? I mean, one of the things I think about is what you're doing is maybe more approachable to some people now who really don't like to read. There are these different levels. Is there a fourth way?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think the way that I don't think it's an either or, and I don't think it's that one is better than the other. I think it is multiplied. What I'm really interested in is how do we reach different levels of people? How do we think about ideas that hit people at different places? And so I'm biased, but the thing that I think is great about podcasting is that, yeah, you can listen to it while you're doing the dishes. You can listen to it on your way to work. The barrier to entry there is lower. And I think, that's why when I talk with my students and they like show me TikTok videos and like YouTube videos that actually have really smart ideas. I had a student 2 days ago who was showing me this weird like TikTok meme. Maybe some of you have seen this. That's like taking like Family Guy and Minecraft, but just talking about like communism and anarchism, and like in a really serious way. But it's doing it in like the quick TikTok form. that's what I think, that's what I'm sort of interested in, is like, how do we sort of reach that? Because then that's the intro into, you know, then you get your book on socialism or whatever. Then you buy your design text, and then you go back in the sort of circular nature that happens between all of these mediums. The sort of ping ponging around is where what I think we should be thinking more about.
Right. So what, you talked a little bit about how you got involved in this through a thesis, which is a great opportunity. But sometimes it's hard to just kind of come up with ideas. You may really want to do something. And this is an open question for everybody. For Lisa, Drawdown, and Jared, if you didn't have this opportunity, how do you think you would have approached this? Anybody have any, like, Lisa, how did you get involved in this?
Well, so the book did come from my thesis as well, as I think so many people's first book does, right? Like you spend all that time doing that research, and then you sort of don't want to let it go, or hopefully you were led to make a project that's big enough, right, that it can translate into other things. But I've just always been fascinated by the internet and specifically history. So even though I'm not a historian, the sort of what I did was I wrote a history book about about the design of online interfaces and kind of how I'm feeling about it. But I would never have written a book if I didn't have to. I'm a bookish person. I love books. I love to read. I love to write, but it felt insurmountable. And so I did it. I did it because I needed to. And now I'm so glad that I did, because now I can't wait to write the next one, even though I wouldn't have said that, in September of 2024 last year. But yeah, that's how I got involved in it. And I've always read books. Books to me are such a fascinating way to share information. They're slower, right? And I think it reaches people in a different way. And I'm so grateful, as Jarrett was just talking about, that we have all of these other mechanisms now to publish and get information out onto into the world, that people can consume in all these different ways.
Right.
I just wanted to jump in because as an archivist, my background is in archives and preservation. And that's where I feel, as much as I love the sort of output of publishing, the ephemerality of things that are produced in other media is what I think is so important about the print tradition as being a carrier for knowledge. And I know that many people are aware of this. We have hundreds of years of knowledge about how to preserve and how to make sure that the transmission of printed work continues, where things that are produced online are oftentimes much more ephemeral. And that's where that conversation between things that are produced online or things that are maybe audio material, oftentimes we're investing in third-party systems. And if you really want to sort of manage the sort of care of those materials over time, it takes a lot of energy and funding. But moving to a print model actually allows you to sort of think about that transmission in a different way. So as I just want to put that into the ecosystem of what we're talking about, because the importance of publishing in print is really something I'm passionate about, because I am concerned about sort of digital materials being more at risk. And so some of the sort of cultural phenomenons that we're seeing and the cultural sort of discourse is actually liable to evaporate if not brought into the print medium.
Yeah. Lisa, and this is a question for all of you, but Lisa, you really went into why you chose to publish with your publisher. You did a lot of background because you were doing it for a reason, and you found out your school was supported by or did support this publishing house, and you went with that. But Chris Swift is asking, how can we convince tenure track committees that these other kinds of publishing are valid to that process? And I know we've talked about this so many times, and I don't know if anybody has an answer yet, but are there, any ideas?
Well, I would just quickly say, I think it's important for those of us who get tenure to try some of these alternative ways, right? So I did a book peer-reviewed with the traditional publishing house because that was the easiest route for me to get to tenure. But now, right, I feel like I can do all these other things and sort of hold them up as also being legitimate, right? And it's so awesome that Jarrett is doing the same thing, right? Like you are doing all of these other kinds of work, and I think other people are too. So I think it's important as a community that once we are to that place where we can hold it up as legitimate, that we do. And then we just need to keep, right, sounding the gong for this. And those of us who do peer review for folks going up for tenure, right, we just need to continue to talk about how important these other venues and types of publishing are.
Definitely. Thanks. Victor, you had a question?
I did, but we can go to Jeannie's question first. Who's on the chat? I'm good with that.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
Jeannie was asking Jarrett, what are your thoughts on the podcast momentum today?
I've benefited from it, but I don't know if it, I don't know if I have any thoughts beyond that. I'm going to say something. I realize this is recorded, and so like I might regret this. I don't actually listen to that many podcasts myself. And so I don't totally know the podcast like space, and like, I know now about sort of like the bro podcast space, like that's sort of like what people are talking about. So I don't know if really, like, I don't really know about that momentum, I guess is what I'm saying. Other than that, I've seen my audience grow, which I think is probably part of that interest. I also think it's background. Like I said before, I think it's a really easy. I think it's like the most accessible medium because it requires your ears, and you can do so many other things. And I think that's its greatest strength. And you can put it on whenever you want. You can put it at 2x speed. It has all this stuff that you can't do with a video, that you can't do with a text. And so I think that's why people are sort of drawn to it. And you have these podcasts that are like 2-3 hours long. And that's a lot easier to consume. And I think that makes it easy for people to kind of jump in and jump out.
Yeah, I agree. Jeannie, did you have any specific podcasts that you were thinking about in terms of momentum?
Should I put it in chat or can I just go on audio?
Go ahead.
Well, first I want to say, Jarrett, that you've done a tremendous job. And the reason I asked about the momentum is because you were able to do something that I haven't really seen yet. Again, I don't listen to that many podcasts, but when I do it, I think that's like a big deal. Mostly because I love to read more so than like listen to like audio information. But there's a lot of that today. People just want the sound bites. And what you've done is like you've taken it, and I don't want to move it into content, but you've taken the snippets and then it becomes a little bit of a digestible. It's pleasing, aesthetically pleasing to the eye, the way you're doing it. And so you've kind of created a bit of a movement momentum in your own right for what this is. And I didn't even think about it as publishing, but it is publishing. So you've like taken one format, one form, found the same piece of information or the idea, but appropriated it, for this audience. So the message kind of gets amplified in all these different directions. And I just see that podcasts are super popular. And I'm just wondering if if there's like, now is this format or form getting lost in the noise, whereas before it was a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you to say. I don't think it is getting lost yet. And I think, again, and I'm not trying to just like praise podcasting as a form, but you said something that I think is right, is you can go deeper and longer on a podcast, which is sort of the opposite of everything else in our culture right now, without feeling like you're investing a lot. You can listen to an hour podcast, and I hope my show is not fluffy, and it has depth and rigor to it, and I hope that comes across, and that for a listener, they don't feel like it's hard to enter into. And I think that is something that podcasting can do. And then you put the clip on social media and that becomes content, but it leads back to something longer, and then leads back to a list of links on the page of things to read after and all that. And I think all of these levels are what's interesting. But I think what you just said is right, is that there's a depth that you can contain in a small amount of time that's really nice and sort of really important part of it, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks. Victor, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, thank you.
It looks like also Sarah Tack had a question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah. Thank you, Lisa.
I'm going to unmute because this is a little bit complex. I sort of want to start with Jarrett because I'm one of these people that are I dabble in so many different places that, and people say, well, what do you do? And it's like, what do I do? I do some video, I do some photography, I'm a designer, I'm a professor, I dabble in sound, and so, it's always heartening to hear other people sort of join in that canon of not being in a canon,
You're my favorite kind of person. I love that. Yeah.
What's even more, maybe I just have ADD and I can't stay focused on something, but also what's interesting for me is I teach at a research institution. I teach graphic design and branding in a communication and media department. There is an art department, but we are not in it. So the expectations for publishing or showing are extremely different. And so my next sort of questions are maybe for all three of you, or Lisa, like you, I started a project that I had no idea at the end of 2019 would take me into wanting to make a book. It was a 365-day photographic project that suddenly I said, boy, I should be posting every day on Instagram, right? So then after all of this, I start categorizing everything based on this topic. And I started designing the book and started talking to some colleagues, and they're saying, oh no, you can't go about it that way. You can't submit a design book to a publisher, because I had no idea. I've never submitted a book to a publisher. And there is some writing in the book, not a lot for each chapter. There's like 2 pages because I'm not a great writer. I'm not an academic writer. And so my question actually is probably for the people that draw down books. Lisa, is like, where does this book belong? Does it belong with an academic publisher, or does it belong with a Drawdown Books or St. Lucy's Books or an art book publisher? It definitely has a lot of social and economic and political commentary as well as artistic merit. And I also don't consider myself a photographer, and yet this is a book it's all photographs. So I'm like, I don't know where to go. I stopped designing it. I've been actually working on an exhibition of drawings and paintings. But my focus, once that show goes up this month, is I'm going to get back to the book, and I want to put out a proposal to somebody, and I don't know where to go.
So we get a lot of inquiries like this. And many independent publishers like us are pretty small. So our funding, as opposed to those big academic publishers that have huge teams, Drawdown Books is just Christopher and I. So that's why our publishing scale is quite different. And we actually don't typically take proposals. But what I'll do is I'll suggest there's a couple of different publishers that will work with designers like Delmonico, Princeton Architectural Press for more sort of more sort of commercial outside of the academic press. There's Rizzoli, things that are set up with structures that you can propose something. But I'd say from what you're telling me about that you're designing the book, that you're really considering all aspects of it, self-publishing and actually doing that yourself might be the step that you want to take. And then looking at the distribution sort of tools that, say, Printed Matter in New York has all of the shops that take things that are self-published, and beginning to work and sort of network with people who can carry that work for you. So part of that is having a discussion as you're designing and sort of thinking about the scale of your publishing project. Are you going to digitally publish it? Are you going to print offset? What sort of, scale, pricing, all of the sort of distribution models. And it's a lot to take on, but it gives you full control of what you're doing. And it's good for those in-between moments, as Jarrett was talking about, like things that don't seem to fit into one world. That's really where self-publishing can be a place to make an imprint, to put your contributions out, and to begin to like build that public that Jarrett also talked about. Great points, Jarrett. All of those are very close to my heart. But you build those connections. And what's interesting is, to that idea that you need peer-reviewed publications if you're in a tenured position. If you begin to self-publish, you can begin to network with people, and you begin to have sort of a publishing record that then can substantiate your efforts when you go to a bigger sort of peer-reviewed publisher. So, I think sometimes people think either or, but I think thinking about everything as being incremental as part of a larger ecosystem, and not to see those sorts of divisions as being things that are disruptive, but are rather opportunities for you to get your hands dirty, get your ideas out there, to get some experience, and then to move into sort of another arena if you so choose, or to continue to work in sort of the artist book publishing, self-publishing realm if you really feel like that's the best fit. Like you're idiosyncratic, you're not fitting into any of the sort of cookie cutter communities that exist.
Thanks. And
Thank you.
Kathleen, because I wanted to have you talk about that a little bit, about self-publishing as another option. So thank you for talking about that. Victor, you ready?
I'm going to again pass it off to Liese Zahabi's question in the chat
Okay.
for drawdown, because I think it's going to be a really good topic.
Great.
Well, and also it looks like Kelsey Gamino also was seconding the question, but I would just love for Christopher and Kathleen for you to talk just briefly, because I'm seeing the time as well, about what it's like to empower students to publish. I think that's such an amazing part of what the two of you do. And so just anything that you want to say about that, I think would be fantastic.
Well, I mean, it's one thing when you begin to work with students, to give them that sort of public interface with their work. And I think there's lots of different models of lots of different scales. We've built it into the DNA of different workshops we've done, as well as into a particular course. But I think knowing that every sort of printed artifact that comes out of the classroom, if you consider it as a public discussion, it can start to circulate in these artist book communities. And, there's all these fairs around the world, very regional school-based fairs that happen, regional fairs, larger national fairs, international fairs, and they can give exposure to the students and to you as an educator that you really can't anticipate. And I think that kind of connection is so important. And I would say for the MFA thesis students, we like to tell students, actually, we haven't been the advisors for the students whose books we carry. They're just students who took our class, but we really have an open door to anyone. That's why that submissions is so important. And I talk to people at book fairs all the time. I'm like, you're an MFA student? Are you making a thesis book? Do you have extra copies? Consider submitting to us. What's wonderful is a lot of the books we sell get acquired by different institutions. Your work ends up in a library. Your work becomes a resource for the next generation. That sort of continuity is incredible. Like when I see students' work acquired by sort of, a big institution, cataloged at that level, and then that record of their work is going to persist well into the future, I think that's super exciting for them. It establishes them. It's also one thing I think is really important to that idea that you don't need to be a perfectionist, is that this book is just a record of where you are at this point. You can make more books in the future. You can make other projects in the future. Like, it doesn't have to define you. So you don't have to think of it as a limiting thing. It's just a record on your career path, on your professional creative path. So that's sort of the framing. But I would say when we work directly with students, that's a very engaged moment where sometimes we teach editorial publications, so we're working with them on the design. But we also have an open door for anyone who wants to make work and put their research into sort of a printed form that can circulate. And we carry all sorts of different thesis books, from books that are flyers and postcards to things that are huge, experimental tomes. And really, we encourage that sort of experiment with form as well.
Thank you, Kathleen. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. I feel like we could go on forever. But I want to mention for anybody who's wants to needs some time to concentrate, we have a virtual event this Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And it's called a focused work section. So if you have a stack of assignments to grade or a deadline or hundreds of emails or something you need to get to, join us for this session. What we'll do is log in at the first 5 minutes, we'll kind of discuss what each one of us wants to accomplish. We'll write for 50 minutes, and at the end, kind of discuss where we got with it. We'd like to maybe make this a regular thing. So you can find out about this again on Instagram under AIGA DEC. Please join us. It may be the start of your next book. Thank you, everyone, so much. Victor, do you want to wrap this up?
I think you did a great job, but thank you, everyone, for coming in. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Be brave and be bold, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you.